Welcome back to Citizens Sports Talk. Jacob Smith, Caden Reinhardt here, and we're here right after the Buffaloes pulled away with the victory against the Blacksburg Bruins on homecoming for Floyd County High School. Caden, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Give us what's your opening thoughts on the win here for the Buffaloes to start the season 2-0.
Yeah, looking back on it, the Buffaloes pulled away with a 12-0 or a 12-point victory, but it wasn't the most dominant victory. They definitely won because of some mistakes that the Bruins ended up making. The turnover battle was one that was extensively in the Buffaloes' favor, which was a big contributing factor to them pulling away tonight. So if you take away some of those turnovers that the Buffaloes were able to get, I think it's a lot closer of a game. And going forward, I don't know how heavily you can rely on getting, say, 3-4 turnovers in a game needing to win.
Yeah, I think you kind of talking about just like listing the turnovers and the miscues from the Bruins. The fumble on the 3rd and 12 on that screen play. Sam Sheff threw an interception. First play of the second drive to Jack Leroy. We talked about Jack Leroy a lot tonight. Luke Mann had a 3-yard rushing touchdown, make it a 3-point game. The chance at the end of the half to tie things up right before half, a bad snap on the field goal attempt. That was another miscue. The missed field goal at the start of the third quarter, the first drive for the Bruins there. Sam Sheff threw another interception on a 3rd and 13. So really 5 big miscues, in my opinion, that really, like you said, you can't really rely consistently on teams to make that many mistakes. But, when you have Sam Phillips throwing running for 3 touchdowns, Nico Milanes came in for Jack Leroy late off the big kick return, or after Jack Leroy had that big kick return, Nico Milanes was able to come in and get the rushing touchdown in the wingback spot. Gavin Jackson had a 22-yard field goal to start the game, and it was all-around team victory. I think the strength of the defense for me, or in my opinion, has really been this secondary. Having Max Harris, Sam Phillips, Jack Leroy, guys that started in the secondary last year, have a year under their belt. J.P. Dunford as well. I mean, they're the starting secondary this year is guys that played last year. They had meaningful reps defensively, and the switch to the 4-3 gets another guy in the secondary back there. So it definitely helped shut down some of the big shots that Sam Sheff was having to take down multiple possessions late in the fourth quarter.
And yeah, you mentioned it being a all-around team victory, and I'd have to agree with that statement very much. We not only seen it this week with the Buffaloes picking up their second victory this year, but last week as well, the conditioning of this team, I think, is outstanding. I mean, we went a scoreless third quarter that was very gritty on both sides of the ball. And then the Buffaloes in the fourth quarter scored 22 points to be able to nail this game away. 22 points is a lot in any quarter, let alone the fourth, when you're 2.5 hours into a ball game, you're getting tired, and it looked like the Buffaloes just weren't tired at all.
Yeah, I would say almost like they hit a second gear, I would have to agree with that, like there's the conditioning. I mean, you have guys starting both ways that we saw last year with the big senior class, but not to this extent, I feel like. Like, you have a lot of – last year it was guys up front starting both ways. This year it's guys in the secondary, skill positions that are having bigger roles. I mean, we talked about it again. Jack Leroy, 2 interceptions, the big kick return for the touchdown, or that set up the Nico Milanes touchdown, and he was all around in the run game as well. So as well as Max Harris as the 2 big wing backs, but Nico got the touchdown in the wing back spot. I'm looking ahead for the Buffaloes, 4 straight road games. I think this was a good win to really make a statement before they go on the road for 4 weeks and play at Grayson, at Fort Chiswell, at Patrick, and at Martinsville before they come home for Carroll County on the 17th of October.
Yeah, I mean, a 4-game road trip is always daunting, and you never want to enter that on a bad stretch, because that's an entire month of play that you're going to want every positive you can get out of that stretch, because it's going to be grueling and demanding going on the road 4 weeks in a row. That return home on the 17th is going to be a big return for the Buffaloes, I think.
And I think it's going to be pretty exciting for us, starting to call some Carroll games. We were there last week. We'll be there in 2 weeks when they play the Cougars. I think it'll be an exciting matchup, because not only do we know the Floyd side of it like we usually would, but we really get to know the Carroll side of it this year, because we're going to call the games there as well.
Definitely, and their program is looking good as well. We can brush on their contest just a little bit tonight.
Yeah, I don't know how much there is to say about a 71-point win and a shutout against Galax. We mentioned it last week. Galax didn't even play. They forfeited their game last week. So definitely tough times for the Maroon Tide. Crazy to think we're talking about it. Just 2 years ago, they were state champions. And now where they're at is just, it's sad to see, but that's just sometimes how the way things work out. Like you just sometimes have like this one really strong group of kids come in all at once, and just sometimes you hit a little shallow pool of talent.
Definitely, and for the Cavaliers, that's the stepping stone you want against a team like that. It's the victory you need to have to show everybody that you are that competing team that you want to be, and against Galax, that's what you need to go out there and do.
Yeah, so Carroll County gets their second win of the year. I mean, they've had two pretty big wins, a 71-point win against Galax, and then, of course, the win 2 weeks ago, week 1, when they played Christiansburg at Christiansburg. Of course, they didn't pull out the win over the Blue Devils in Hillsville week 2, but I mean, something we didn't really talk about a whole lot, but when we previewed that game. But looking at it now, I mean, Grayson County was a defending state championship team. I mean, they competed for a state championship. Obviously, they came up short, losing in the title game, but I mean, they're a legit football program, no doubt about it. So if we want to jump into some other scores from around the region for football, Glenver defeated Cave Spring, getting their third straight win on the season. So this will also be Cave Spring's third loss this year. They'll be 0-3. Glenver's 3-0. James River beat Perry McClure 35-7. Patrick beat up on North Stokes out of North Carolina pretty bad. This is the second week in a row they've had teams from North Carolina come up and play them. They'll play a regional team in Chatham next week. And speaking of Chatham, they did beat Smith Mountain Lake Christian Academy 26-19. So that's a pretty big win for them to get win number 2 on the year. Gretna beat Tunstall 38-12, a big win for them. They're second in a row. And Dan River and Liberty both dropping their second straight games this year. Dan River to Bassett and Liberty to Stanton River. And Liberty will start their Seminole District schedule next week. So definitely interesting to see how the region's playing out so far this year. The Buffaloes, the Highlanders, and Nelson County are the only undefeated teams left in the region through 3 weeks of play. The Buffaloes 2-0, the Governors out of Nelson County 2-0, and Glenver now 3-0. So definitely looks like we have 3 top teams early. We'll see if that stays as status quo when we're talking about the playoffs, week 10 and 11, potentially really gearing up for that playoff push. But I think we'll take a quick break. Coming up next, talking about the cross-country meet from last week, our golf update, and, of course, talking about some Floyd County Lady Buffs volleyball. You're watching Citizen Sports Talk here on CCTV Channel 20. All right, welcome back to Citizen Sports Talk. We're here getting ready to talk about some of the other sports that have been going on this week. Taking a look at cross country, they were at the Knights Crossing Invitational on September 6th. Girls varsity placed 21st out of 39 teams in a large school race. They were the second. They got second place out of the 2A schools, and then boys varsity was 39th out of 45 teams in a large school race, and they placed second out of the 2A schools. I believe the girls got second to Radford, and guys got second to Glenver. That's really the update that I have from cross country from last week. If you want to go ahead and talk to us a little bit about golf, the golf update, how the team's doing. I mean, we talked previously about their district win the other week in the district match, so I'll let you take it away from here.
Yeah, so for the golf team, no major updates outside of, like you just mentioned, going up to Blacksburg last week, taking on the Bruins, just as the football team did here tonight. Picking up the victory there, but starting a little bit of state championship and postseason prep. They're heading east up towards Tappahannock, going towards the state championship course that'll be at Hobbs Hole this year. That'll be on October 14th, just getting some preparation in case the sub-regional and regional tournaments go as planned for the golf team and they make it back to states. So early preparation, just about a month out, should be good for what they need. Moving into the sub-regionals, that'll be at the end of the month. That is at Great Oaks here in Floyd on the 29th of September. And then a week after for the regionals, that's in Appomattox at Falling River. That will be the 6th of October. So just gearing up for that. Heading up there east to play at that state championship Hobbs Hole course. So just getting some preparation in for that. And that's just about the update for this week.
Gotcha. And I feel like that's the expectation at this point for the golf team. Like that needs to be the goal every year, to be playing in Rappahannock, competing for a state championship, especially given the success that the golf programs had the last few years. Of course, won the state championship 3 of the last 4 years, back-to-back 1 year, back-to-back, and then winning it all last year. They were the runners-up in the 1 year they didn't win, so they've really been the team to beat here in the last 4 or 5 years. So definitely exciting to see how the season wraps up for them, and it feels like the season's just getting started for football, and it feels that same way for volleyball too. The Lady Buffs varsity had 3 games this week. They were at Liberty on Monday, at home versus Blacksburg on Thursday, and at home versus Patrick County on Thursday. The Lady Buffs were able to get a win against the Lady Minutemen 3-0 in 3 sets. So they were able to take care of the Lady Minutemen both games this year. They hosted Blacksburg, the first of their 2 matchups with the Bruins. How's everybody this week playing the Bruins? It's just kind of a coincidence. But the Blacksburg defeated Floyd 3-0 in 3 sets as well. And then Thursday, Patrick County came to Allen Cantrell Court and played and beat the Lady Buffs in 4 sets. So the points total for volleyball, they're at, trying to do some mental math in my head, I believe 23 points through 6 games. They had 6 for the first time they beat Liberty. 9 when they beat William Fleming, 6 the second time they beat Liberty, and then they got 2 points with the win despite losing, they did get points for the Blacksburg game, as Blacksburg's a 4A school. So definitely some optimism for the volleyball team. I would say, they're picking up some wins early. Liberty twice. They beat William Fleming in 3 sets last week. And, Blacksburg and Patrick County, good teams. Being able to compete with them is important. So I think that's what you would expect year 2 with Laura Allen as the head coach. It's kind of like the building blocks of a program. I think we see it in professional sports all the time. Like that first year may look really rough. The second year, you kind of start winning some games. You start competing more. They get closer. The losses are closer. And one possession, like in the NFL, for example, like one possession games, like the Detroit Lions are a good example of that. Year 1, they struggle to win a game every week, or they only won 3 or 4 games. Year 2, they get a little bit more scrappy. They get just around the 500 mark, play one possession games the whole season, and then year 3 under Dan Campbell, able to make the postseason run. So not trying to take away from volleyball with a football analogy, but that's the only way I could really explain, how to really turn around a program that really hasn't had an established leadership from the head coach position in the last few years, or consistent leadership per se. But I think that's all we have for our other fall sports. I think coming up next, we'll preview what's coming up for the next week for Carroll County and Floyd County athletics, and we'll preview some of the football matchups for next week, and we'll be back in just a moment. You're watching Citizen Sports Talk. Yep.
And welcome back to Citizens Sports Talk on Channel 20. We're here previewing a couple of games across next week. We're going to start with football here. And first for the Carroll County Cavaliers, they'll be on the road next week, traveling to Fort Chiswell to take on the 0-3 Pioneers, looking for their first victory tonight, losing to Auburn 29-13, as the Carroll County Cavaliers are looking for their 3rd victory in 4 weeks. Have victories over both Christiansburg and, like we mentioned, Galax tonight. That one loss coming against the Grayson County Blue Devils, who Floyd will travel next week to take on. Looking to protect that undefeated record. We've seen them pick over victories over Narrows and Blacksburg, just as the Grayson County Blue Devils were able to pick up a victory tonight, 45-3 over Tazewell. Any thoughts heading into those games?
I think, first of all, congrats to Auburn for getting their first win since the football program has returned this year. I think that says a lot about Fort Chiswell this year. I know they're down pretty bad in terms of, we're kind of in a similar situation to Galax, where you have a shallow talent pool this year of kids coming out, and it's just hard to, there's only so much you can do with the little amount of talent you have. Not saying that there's no talent on the team, but just you need numbers in order to have a successful program, in my opinion. So I think Carroll County will have an easy week 4 victory. They took care of business against Galax tonight, and I think they can take care of business next week. That's one thing you got to do to solidify yourself as a contender. You got to beat the bad teams. You can't have those trap games where it's, obviously it's any given Friday, just like it is in college or the NFL. It's any given Saturday, it's any given Sunday. Same applies here on Fridays. But I do think Carroll County has a chance to win 2 straight games for when they welcome the Cougars, which will be at that game in 2 weeks. But then really transitioning to that Floyd versus Grayson game, I think that'll be the more interesting of the two. I think we've had a chance to see both teams. Obviously, we've called the two Floyd games, and then we got to see Grayson against Carroll in week 2. I think what we saw with the Buffaloes tonight, like you talked about in our first segment, was, how many mistakes from your opponent can you rely on them to have success. But I honestly feel like some of those mistakes, weren't really that. I mean, by the end of the game, it didn't really feel like they had that much of a difference, But I think Grayson County is a tough opponent, like we talked about earlier. They're coming off a state championship appearance, so definitely be interesting to see. They defeated Floyd last year, so they're going to be a tough matchup for the Buffaloes this year. And sometimes you do also have to consider the travel. Floyd's going to have a nice long bus ride to Grayson County next week, so I think at some point that does have to go into consideration just a little bit. Not saying that's going to be the deciding factor of that game, because Grayson was able to come up here and get the win here last year. But, at some point maybe that would come into effect. But I expect it to be an exciting game, and probably the better game of those two that we're talking about. And if you want me to go ahead and take over, talking about some other events coming up as we wrap up this third edition of Citizen Sports Talk. On the 13th, we're looking at Carroll County Sports First. The girls JV volleyball is playing a tournament at Patrick Henry Glade Spring High School. They'll be playing Central Wise, Grundy, Abingdon, and Chilhowie. A nice 4-game stretch for the JV volleyball team for Patrick County, from times of 10 a.m., 1 p.m., 3 p.m., and 6 p.m. And then, of course, you have Sundays off. Looking at Monday, JV and varsity are at Lord Botetourt for volleyball, and JV football will be taking on Fort Chiswell at Carroll County High School. So definitely going to be one to watch out for, and kind of a preview of what you're going to see for the Pioneers and the Cavaliers next Friday. On the 16th, golf varsity match at Draper Valley Golf Course versus Fort Chiswell, and then middle school volleyball will be playing at Pulaski County Middle School versus the Cougars. On Wednesday, September 17th, middle school golf will play at Blue Ridge Country Club versus Galax, and boys and girls varsity cross country will be at Grayson County Rec Park taking on Grayson County. And then Thursday, September 18th, middle school volleyball will be taking on Blacksburg at Carroll County High School, and then JV and varsity volleyball will be taking on Floyd at Carroll. So that will be definitely one to watch out for. Probably one we'll really dig deep into next week. We'll probably have to bring in some help to help us really dive deep into the Cavaliers and Lady Buffs matchup for volleyball. So then looking at the calendar for Floyd County, don't have anything on Saturday or anything of the weekend that's listed on the Three Rivers website. So Monday, September 15th, middle school, JV, and varsity volleyball will all be taking on Grayson County. Middle school will be in the old gym, and then JV and varsity will be in the new gym on Allen Cantrell Court. On the 16th, golf varsity, you mentioned it earlier, the golf varsity match at Great Oaks Country Club. And then golf JV match will be at Great Oaks versus Blacksburg at the same time. On the 17th, middle school will have a match versus Galax at Blue Ridge Country Club. And then middle school, JV, and varsity volleyball will all be playing Martinsville at Floyd County High School, middle school in the old gym, JV and varsity in the new gym, as well, same as it is listed for Monday with Grayson County. And then Thursday, a lot of things listed here. Middle school football will be taking on Grayson County. Another one, kind of like we've talked about with the JV game on Monday between Fort Chiswell and Carroll County, just kind of giving a preview of what next Friday for the Buffaloes and Blue Devils will look like. Middle school game will be at Coach Buell Field versus Grayson County. And then, like we mentioned earlier, JV and varsity volleyball will be at Carroll County before the ultimate matchups end the week. The two football games, the Carroll County football going to Fort Chiswell and Floyd County football going to Grayson County to wrap up everything that's going on here in the next 7 days. So I can't really think of anything else that we need to mention. Kaden, is there anything you'd like to add before we sign off for the night?
I think that just about covers it for the night.
All right. Next week we'll definitely be tuning in. We'll be discussing some of the road games for the Buffaloes and Cavaliers. We'll be talking about this Lady Cavaliers, Lady Buffaloes volleyball match that will be occurring next Thursday, and plenty more here on Citizen Sports Talk. We'll see you next week. Thank you for tuning in.